Hi, my name is Jennifer Adams. I'm 24 years old. There were moments in my life when I was absolutely sure that I had finally found the perfect love that I had been looking forward to all my life. I spent 6 years with Peter Miller, and it seemed that he was the embodiment of my hopes, dreams, the very person I could call my other half. He and I always laughed, dreamed, shared little joys, and it all seemed so real, genuine. When he proposed to me in April 2024, I was over the moon. As soon as his words sounded in the air, like the melody of a long-awaited promise, my heart was filled with exultation. Future plans gained clarity in colors. We scheduled the wedding for May 2025, and the date was not accidental. It was the day we first met, that very first moment when our gazes crossed and the world seemed to stop. I imagined how we would celebrate our love against the background of blooming flowers, under a bright spring sky, surrounded by friends and family, on this important day that I had dreamed of for so long. In July, I already started planning our celebration. I eagerly took up the choice of scenery, thinking about a theme that could reflect our spring magic. Light blue shades combined with snow, white elegance. This palette was for me a symbol of purity and tranquility, something both gentle and eternal. I spent hours creating mood boards on Pinterest, absorbing ideas and details, from the finest lace on a wedding dress to floral arrangements that would brighten our day. My heart was pounding with trepidation and happiness. I lived every moment as if I were already standing at the altar. But the more I shared my ideas with Peter, the more often I came across his cool, almost casual attitude. In response to my long messages with photos and ideas, I received only stingy comments like, "Looks good," or a short smiley face with a raised finger. I tried to justify his behavior, convincing myself that it was just a consequence of his workload at work. Maybe he wanted to leave me room for creativity, to let me realize my dreams of a perfect wedding. But somewhere deep inside, in the darkest corners of my mind, anxiety was already creeping in. Was his indifference a sign? Was it a cold wind that foreshadowed a storm coming from the silence? Peter's detachment was manifested not only in matters of the wedding. There was something else, deeper, something that grew in the shadow of our relationship and remained almost invisible: his mother, Karen Miller. From the very beginning, Karen was actively involved in our lives, and at first I found something touching about it. Peter was an only child, and their closeness seemed to me to be evidence that he was a caring person who respected family values. Her presence, constant and meaningful, became for me something like a second background of our union, a supportive and even protective force. But over time, it became like something completely different. I began to feel the suffocating influence that Karen had on our lives. Peter could call her at any time, asking for advice on any matter. The issues that seemed to have to be resolved by us concerned only our relationship, but he invariably sought her advice. 2 weeks ago, I thought I was living in my own fairy tale. It was a day that I had been preparing for in my mind since the moment Peter proposed to me. The day that seemed to be the embodiment of all my girlish dreams was shopping for a wedding dress with my mother and sister. We eagerly went to boutiques, sorted through luxurious fabrics, smooth silks, and the finest lace. I laughed and worried, feeling as if all the stars had lit up, and each of them was shining for my happiness. After trying on a lot of dresses, I finally found it, the one that turned me into the girl of my dreams. It was a dress of extraordinary beauty. Flowing fabrics caressed the skin, exquisite lines framed the figure, gently emphasizing it. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at my reflection, and tears of joy, awe, and pure happiness came to my eyes. Mom and sister stood next to each other, their faces glowing with pride and love. Their looks spoke louder than any words. This moment, so long awaited and magical, filled me with a feeling of unconditional joy. Unable to resist, I sent Peter a photo. In this dress, I felt like a bride, the embodiment of the girl he once loved, and I wanted him to feel it with me. His response was restrained, but I was ready to accept that, too, catching a moment of happiness like a flying butterfly. For a moment, I believed that his short, "looks beautiful," was a sign of his quiet approval, his seemingly unexpressed but supportive love. But at that moment, I had no idea that this approval would soon turn into a source of pain. As it turned out, later, he immediately sent a photo to his mother. It would seem an innocent action, but it was the beginning of a chain of events that broke my dream day. Karen, his mother, saw the photo, and her reaction was completely unexpected. Her rage flared up like a fire fed by the wind, and without waiting for me to return, she started calling me. I saw her calls, but being caught up in a magical moment, I decided that I could talk to her later when I got home. I had no idea what to expect. When I crossed the threshold of our house, I immediately felt a change in the air. Karen was already there, as if she had broken into my personal space using the spare key that we had entrusted to her solely in case of an emergency. She was sitting on the couch, her face as gloomy as a storm. When I entered, Karen stood up abruptly, and her voice sounded like a whip, lashing out at me with accusations that I did not immediately understand. Confused, I tried to figure out what had caused such an outburst of anger, and asked what exactly had excited her so much. Karen said that I had broken my promise, a promise supposedly made to her many years ago, to wear her own antique dress to the wedding. I was stunned. I had never had to remember such a promise before, and even if I once politely expressed admiration for this dress, I certainly did not mean that I had to wear it on a day that was supposed to be mine, and mine alone. But Karen wasn't listening to my explanations. Her accusations were getting tougher and tougher. Like red-hot coals, they burned, penetrating into the very heart. She called me a liar and, crossing her arms over her chest, loudly declared that I was unworthy of her son. I stood in front of her, amazed and humiliated, trying to stay on my feet from the sharp pain that pierced me with her words. At that moment, I hoped with all my heart for Peter's protection. I expected him to come up, support me, stop this flow of injustice. But he was nowhere to be found. That night, as I lay in bed, depressed and hurt, the memories of our quarrel weighed on me like a heavy stone on my soul. In my mind, I replayed every moment over and over again. Karen's accusations, Peter's distant look, his dry and seemingly indifferent words. The one whom I considered my partner, my support, preferred not me, but her. Even now, after all these years, he has left me alone, lying in silence, full of doubts and disappointment. My thoughts tormented me. I was painfully aware that all the sacrifices made for the sake of this union remained unnoticed and unappreciated. Morning came, and I woke up to a dull sound on my phone. It was new messages. Text after text, line after line, Karen's words, accusatory, derogatory, fell on me like an icy rain. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a woman unworthy of her son, as if she was trying to erase all my efforts, all the sincerity that I put into our relationship. With each new message, her words cut me deeper, leaving painful, bleeding marks. Tears burned my eyes, but these tears were not from resentment, but from misunderstanding how someone whom I sincerely tried to please could show such cool contempt. Having plucked up the courage, I showed these messages to Peter, hoping that after seeing them, he would finally understand how insulting they were, how unfair and cruel his mother's words were. I waited for his reaction, his support, but all he replied was just indifference. She's probably just upset that you don't want to wear her dress. Give her time to calm down. These words, simple, but cold and indifferent, pierced me like a dagger, and it became clear to me that he did not understand that this was not just a disagreement about a dress. It was about something much more meaningful. It was about him, as a partner, being there for me, protecting me, supporting me in the most difficult moment. Instead, He left me alone, as if he didn't see the pain his indifference was causing me at all. I tried to convey to him that this is our wedding, and I should feel beautiful and confident in the dress I chose. She offered several compromises: to wear a family heirloom, even if it was an ornament or something small from her dress, as a symbol, as a sign of respect for her wishes. But even that didn't shake his stubbornness. Everything was either the way Karen wanted it to be, or nothing at all, and I began to realize that my own opinion, my desires, my future were nothing to them, meant nothing in this game of a demanding mother and her obedient son. The days passed in heavy tension, as in an endless dream. Karen didn't back down, and her war against me continued. She started sending messages to my friends, trying to turn them against me, and this further undermined my already fragile peace of mind. Peter just nodded in agreement, tacitly supporting her, and it became increasingly difficult for me to understand where his love was, the one he had once assured me of. I felt like I was starting to go crazy, as if just wanting to wear my dress had become a crime in the eyes of his family. Finally, on one of those long, lonely nights when my heart could no longer tolerate silence, I realized that the moment had come for a serious conversation. I no longer had the strength to keep this pain to myself, and I knew that either Peter would understand and support me, or I would have to accept the inevitable. That evening, I sat in our living room, waiting for him to return, having made up my mind, perhaps for the last time, to tell him what was bothering me. As soon as he entered, I took his hand, forcing him to sit next to me. Summoning all my strength, I poured out my thoughts and feelings in front of him, explaining how painful it was for me, how lonely I felt, that I could no longer bear the constant interference of his mother, who seemed to tear us apart with a thin but inexorable thread, tearing thread after thread from the canvas of our love. I stood in front of Peter, waiting for at least some glimmer of understanding in his eyes, but his face remained cold, expressionless. Reminding him that this was supposed to be our wedding, I expressed my pain and disappointment, but he just waved me off defensively, as if he was trying to protect not our relationship, but his connection with his mother. His words were like a slap in the face. A wedding is not only for us, but also for the family. Every word cut like a knife, revealing the truth that I didn't want to see before. Disappointment boiled over in me, and I couldn't help myself. I asked him a question that had been tormenting my soul for a long time. Peter, will you marry me or your mother? For a moment his face distorted, irritation flashed in his eyes, and his voice trembled with anger. He started shouting, accusing me of selfishness, of inflating minor problems, and it became clear to me that he was not going to understand me, was not going to change his attitude. Then I calmly said that I was reconsidering our engagement, that I would not be able to marry a man who would not protect me even in front of his own mother. I wanted to leave, to end the argument before it was too late. But Peter blocked my way, grabbing my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. Before I could realize what was happening, he spun me around and slapped me in the face. The shock hit me in a wave, and then the pain came, burning, leaving a bright mark on my cheek. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the devastation that filled me. I couldn't believe that the man I loved, the man I longed for with all my heart, was capable of such a thing. My eyes filled with tears, and I stood as if paralyzed, watching him furiously leave the house and slam the door loudly, as if I was the cause of all our problems. He left me alone, turned away again, went back to his mother, as always. Through my blurred eyes, I realized that I could no longer live in this house, in this relationship, that there was nothing left of my love but bitter dust. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and called my sister, Lauren. Her voice, full of concern and anxiety, was my salvation, and within a few minutes she was standing on the threshold. When Lauren saw the red mark on my cheek, her eyes flashed with anger and sympathy, and she silently hugged me, surrounding me with warmth and protection. "You're coming with me," she said firmly, leaving me no choice. We packed my things together, and with each folded object, I felt an invisible wall growing between me and this house. This stage of my life was over, and there was no point in staying in the past. Lauren helped me leave. Her confident steps and determined gaze supported me, gave me courage. Once outside, I felt a mixture of relief and bitterness. It was a new reality, and even though it was still unclear, it was now free from the toxic shackles that had held me back for so long. The next morning, with Lauren by my side, I decided to take a step that symbolized the end of this destructive path. We went to the police station, and I applied for a ban on Peter. Every word in my statement, every document, every photograph confirming the traces of his cruelty and the messages from Karen were painful reminders for me of what I had been through. I remembered everything with bitterness, but I knew that these steps, no matter how difficult they were necessary for my protection, for restoring my dignity. After submitting the application, I made several difficult but liberating calls to cancel the wedding. Explaining the situation at the venue, I was surprised by the understanding and compassion shown by the staff. They not only returned the deposit without delay, but also offered to reschedule it for any other event. Unexpectedly for myself, I accepted their offer, deciding to turn this date into something positive, albeit painful. I decided to use the pledge for an early birthday party, celebrating my newfound freedom and strength, my right to be happy and loved by myself. In the process of canceling all orders and contracts for the upcoming wedding, I faced another obstacle. The caterer turned out to be not as accommodating as the staff of the hall, and, despite my explanations, refused to return part of the deposit. Although it was a blow to my budget, the feeling of relief from being released from the bonds of a frozen relationship outweighed everything. The losses seemed like just a small part of the big drama I was in. All I wanted to do now was put it behind me. As I took the wedding ring off my finger, I felt its weight in my hand suddenly seem unbearable. This symbol of hope and love, which seemed so important to me, now remained only a useless memory of unfulfilled dreams. Peter refused to take it, saying it was a gift. I decided to sell it, sending the proceeds to a shelter for victims of domestic violence. It was my little way of making sense of the pain, turning it into support for those who found themselves in a situation similar to mine. This not only gave me a sense of completion, but also a feeling that my step would become something important for others. However, the story with Karen was not over yet. She started a smear campaign against me, using social media as a weapon. Her posts and comments poured in one after another, full of lies and accusations. She portrayed me as ungrateful and selfish, attributing her son's broken heart to me. She even went so far as to contact some members of my family, hoping to win them over to her side. But, fortunately, my family and real friends did not succumb to her manipulations, seeing only anger and attempts at control in her words. Their support during this difficult period has become a real support for me, making me feel that I am not alone in my struggle. Peter seemed torn between pleading for forgiveness and blaming me. One evening he suddenly appeared at the door of my new apartment. His face was wet with tears, and he begged me to return to him. This once familiar image now seemed alien, causing only cold and disgust. I had to threaten to call the police before he finally left. This moment finally strengthened my resolve to continue on the path forward and not look back anymore. With the help of my parents, who, after learning the whole truth, were furious at what had happened, I took the last things out of the apartment where Peter and I had once planned to start a life together. My parents not only supported me emotionally, but also offered to cover any legal costs that might arise, assuring me that I was not alone in this. My environment began to divide. Some friends were there to support me, but there were also those who couldn't understand why I just didn't wear a dress to save the world. These friendships became strained, but I realized that it was for the best. This painful experience showed who really stood by my side, who was ready to support me at times when strength and perseverance were required of me. The day came, which I decided to use not for a wedding, but to celebrate a new chapter in my life. I had an early birthday party in the room where the wedding was supposed to take place. Surrounded by friends and family, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. It was an evening of laughter, dancing, and real joy. The room was filled with light and warmth, and I felt the long-awaited freedom that I had been fighting for so long. This day has remained in my memory as a holiday of healing, a symbol of my recovery. But the changes did not end there. Taking advantage of a trip that was once intended for a honeymoon, my sister Lauren and I decided to go to Paris, the city I had dreamed of since my youth. It wasn't the romantic trip I imagined, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed. We wandered through the narrow streets of Paris, enjoyed French cuisine, laughed and had long, deep conversations that seemed to erase the traces of pain and give me back a sense of wholeness. Every corner of this city, every sunset, every conversation with Lauren and the silence of cozy cafes became stages of returning to myself for me. The trip to Paris, which became a symbol of love and perseverance, ended, leaving bright memories in my soul, and I returned home, ready for a new stage in my life. The first thing I did was focus on my own healing. When I started going to therapy, I delved into my inner wounds, opening up the scars left by my relationship with Peter. It wasn't easy. With each session I had to deal with those red flags that I had ignored for so long, with compromises that destroyed my self-esteem, and with the shadow of love, which turned out to be an illusion. Gradually, step by step, therapy helped me to understand myself more deeply, taught me to listen to my own instincts and build healthy boundaries. This process has enriched me with new tools to strengthen my self-esteem, and a promise never again to settle for less than the respect and love I deserve. There was a lull with Peter and Karen in the end. Their presence disappeared against the background of my life, especially after the restraining order and the mutual prohibition agreement on contacts were signed. Peter's desperate attempts to win me back gradually stopped, and Karen's campaign faded as others began to see the true state of things. Shortly after that, I received an unexpected message from Peter's father. He apologized for the behavior of his son and Karen, and expressed understanding for my decision. It was a small gesture, but it meant more to me than I could have imagined. It was strange that of all people, he was the one who showed compassion, but it is moments like this that show who we really are. My family has always been my support during these difficult months. My parents were angry and outraged by the ordeal I had to go through, but there was not a shadow of a doubt about their support. They were willing to do anything to help me recover. Most of my friends also rallied around me, and I was eternally grateful to them for that. But there were also those who did not understand why I decided to break off the engagement because of seemingly little things. These relationships became strained, but over time I realized that it was also part of my path to healing, to surround myself only with those who are able to support me, who see my true feelings and needs. I sold my wedding ring, deciding to donate the proceeds to a shelter for victims of domestic violence. This gesture is one of the most inspiring things I've done for myself. By doing so, I felt that I was regaining my strength, turning suffering into something meaningful for others. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my decision, but the truth is that this experience has taught me some of the most important lessons in my life. I have learned to trust myself, not to settle for less, and to realize that my happiness and well-being come first. Although I am not ready to start a relationship again, I now know for sure that I will approach them with a clear understanding of what I want and need. I will no longer ignore the warning signs and will always put respect and partnership first. Now, finally free from an oppressive relationship, I find joy in focusing on myself. I'm returning to a hobby that I didn't find time to do before, spending more time with friends and family, rediscovering myself beyond any commitment. I feel strong, wise, and resilient, like I've never known myself before. And for the first time in a long time, a genuine hope for a future full of joy and self-love settled in my heart. Thank you for joining me on this journey, which was not only a test for me, but also an opportunity to strengthen my own spirit and self-confidence. If this story has touched you, made you think, or helped you with any of your own experiences, I would be pleased to hear your thoughts. Support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss more similar stories about power, love, and self-acceptance. Your comments mean more to me than you can imagine, so feel free to share your reactions and thoughts. I'll be glad to know how this story resonated in your hearts.